Hello and welcome to another episode of the Leo Alves podcast. And in today's podcast episode, I have a very exciting guest on and someone I've been wanting to speak to you for a while. Her name is Traci. And I'm not going to say too much because I'm going to let her introduce herself. And otherwise, I guess we'll just go straight over to you. So you can maybe mention what you do, where you're from, and then we can just go from there.
Okay, well, thank you, Leo, and thanks for having me. Glad to be here. So, my name is Traci, and I have a fitness and online fitness program and company called Fitness with Traci. And my target audience is women over 50, because I am a woman over 50. And I just believe that women over 50 we're special and we have special needs and special wants and special desires around fitness as we get older. And so I really focus on reaching out and supporting women over 50 as they begin their strength training journey, or even just continue their strength training journey.
Okay. And yeah, of course, like I'm well aware of all of that as well that you've mentioned. And of course, I think that's amazing for the listener to be aware of. Obviously, if you've been listening for a while, you'll know that my target audience, the listener included, isn't mostly, it's not necessarily people over 50. But the reason why I really wanted to have this conversation with you is because everyone gradually grows older. And I think this is something that a lot of people maybe don't think about, the listener
Mhm.
included, and an older version of myself, I would say, and perhaps a younger version of yourself. We don't really think about that until it's like happening, or maybe there's just a day where you have that realization. So I know for a fact that everyone, the listener included, is going to get a lot of benefit just from listening to maybe the conversation and what you have to say as well.
Mhm.
And so yeah,
Mhm.
that's why I really wanted to get you on. But just out of curiosity, and before we get stuck into like the more exciting stuff, topics as to why we're here. So are you located in the USA? Just okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am
Okay.
in the United States, in the state of Virginia,
Okay.
and I'm in particularly Northern Virginia. Some people may recognize the term DMV, and it stands for District of Columbia,
Mm.
Maryland, and Virginia. So Northern Virginia. So that's where I'm located on the East Coast.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I know it. I've never been to Virginia, but yeah, I'm well aware of the East Coast. I've been to the USA a few times now. Um, but anyway, I guess we'll just get stuck into. So the first topic that I really had in mind, and I guess this is quite a broad question, but we can, we can take this down any route. I guess we feel like we want to is so why is it, I guess, is as we grow older, or in your case, especially ladies over 50, why is it that strength training is so important?
Right. So, strength training is important for a number of different reasons. And I love how you talked about the fact that even though you may not be 50, or even though you may not be 40 or even 30, right? This conversation will be important for everyone because we all need to recognize and understand that, by the time you reach age 30, you begin to lose muscle mass. And because of that, it's important that you strength train not only at a young age, and I might even add, particularly at a young age, so that you can help maintain muscle mass as you grow older. It's something that's going to happen to all of us, but there's a way that you can help combat, right, against the amount of muscle loss. So it's really important for you, whether you're age 25 or whether you're age 55, to begin strength training, just to make sure that you stay strong, continue to build muscle mass. And the older you get, Leo, you're at higher risk for falls and accidents, right? And the more muscle you have, the more likely you are to recover more quickly. And also you've stumbled before, right? Stumbled and almost fallen. And also you have that ability to perhaps catch yourself a little bit better before you actually fall. So I know I took it from 0 to 100 very quickly, but those are some reasons why we all need to strength train.
And they're very real reasons as well. And I know you might say, yeah, it might be 0 to 100, as you said, but again, they're very real reasons. They definitely happen. And it's interesting, like on the falling part, it's actually quite interesting that you mentioned that, because just coincidentally in my last podcast episode, I was speaking about with another guest, and it
Mhm.
was it was a statistic I came across that day. And I'll be honest, I haven't fact checked this, but it was from a reliable source, where I think Japan has one of the lowest I think it's one of the lowest death rates, for lack of a better term, worldwide, for the more elderly population of death from falling.
Interesting.
And as I used to live in Japan, and the reason why I mentioned this is because I used to live in Japan, and until this day, so I've lived in the US, and I've lived in England, and I've lived in Portugal and Japan, and until this day, Japan is the only country where I actually, when I worked, I used to sometimes I'd go for workouts in the local park. And
Mhm.
I never saw this in another country, but Japan was the only country where I would see elderly people gathering in the park and doing their workouts. And I would see other guys who maybe easily over 50, maybe over 60, and they'd go to the bars and they'd be doing chin-ups and they'd be doing pull-ups. And I was amazed. I thought that was really impressive. And I just, when I heard that statistic, I was like, you know what? That doesn't surprise me, because I can see the people out there, they really make a lot more of a conscious effort.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. And I can tell you, you are not going to see that quite often here in the United States. So I love hearing that. So there you go. That you've just shared another reason. And it sounds like with some evidence that it is definitely important to stay active. And I myself, I'm what am I? I'm 56, will be 57 this year in July. And you'll figure it out. The older you get, the more you think you're not that old. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm 56. I'm really not that old. And you figure middle age, because we're living longer. And the idea is to be as active as you can for as long as you can. So, I'm hoping and praying that by the time I get 90, I'm still pretty active and doing things. And it's going to look different than what I'm doing right now. Leo, I even find that, some of the things that I could do 6 years ago are much more challenging now, as you get older. And it doesn't mean that you stop. It just means that you keep going and you lift as heavy is to you currently, right? Because heavy changes. Heavy
Relative,
change.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's all relative.
Mm-hmm.
So, actually, did you want to say anything else before okay. So, why do you think it is that so many people, maybe when they're over 50, they tend to, I was going to say, avoid strength training. I could maybe also even say maybe they're a bit fearful of it. Why do you think that's the case?
No, I think that's a good question. Why do people over 50, maybe avoid strength training and physical activity in general, right? So, um, that's a good question. And I think there are so many factors, Leo, really. I think that sometimes as you get older, you really do become very busy. And not to say that younger folks aren't busy, but you're busy with family, you're busy with adult children, you're busy with a job, you're busy at this point with perhaps your parents who are older, and you're caring for them as well, outside obligations. And so sometimes you yourself, you begin to take a back seat to everything else that is going on. You're 50 and 60, right? You're in this generation between your children and between your parents. And so you're very busy with all that. And so I think you begin to take a back seat to your own health. And so you've got to begin to put yourself first. I think also what happens is, as it is related to women, I think also what happens is this whole idea of strength training and lifting weights um, is not as common because, like, I don't want, and you've heard it, right? I don't want to get bulky. Um, I don't want to have big muscles and things like that. And it's a fair concern. I get it. And it is very hard to have that appearance as a woman. And I don't mean that it's you're incapable, but it takes a lot of work
Yeah, a
to
lot
build
of
muscle.
conscious
Even
effort.
right, even as a man, right? It takes a
Oh
lot
yeah,
of
yeah,
work
yeah.
to build muscle. And so it's just helping people realize, particularly women, that it is important to be strong. It is important to challenge your body because your body needs challenge and your body requires movement. Like, we're not meant to be sedentary. We're not meant to sit all day like we typically do. And so I think that's another thing, just work. Most of our jobs, most of our careers involve sitting. And so after a long day of sitting, what do you want to do when you go home? You want to sit some more because sitting makes you tired, right? Exhausted. So you want to sit more. So I think all of those factors play a role into women and people over 50 maybe not exercising, not working out as much as they should.
Mm. Yeah, I think you described it all very, very well. I think the point, yeah, that there's many points I could even expand on. I think the one where you said where there's just a misconception as to, they a lot of people think they're going to get very big and bulky just from you could even say just dabbling in strength training. Like it's not going to happen. As you said, it requires a lot of conscious effort over, of course it can happen if you want it to, it can, but it requires a lot of conscious effort consistently over the long term. If you are just looking to again get stronger because you want to have maybe better balance, maybe more confidence, you certainly can get that without necessarily looking bulky. I think and I'd love to hear your opinion on this as well, is maybe because sometimes I feel like there is a misconception around what is involved when it comes to strength training, and maybe a lot of people just maybe think it's maybe they just have a misunderstanding of what's include, like what they have to do. Maybe they think they have to lift these crazy weights. They say,
Uh,
oh, this is so heavy for me, I can't do it. And whereas strength training can be depending on your starting point, of course, it could even just be body weight stuff. And that, even depending again where you start, you could
yes.
see tremendous improvements from body weight exercises, and that's strength training.
Absolutely. I love that you brought that up. Oh man, I can go in so many different directions with
Please,
what you said.
yeah.
But I always, my message, whether it's on social media, whether it's to my current clients, is just start where you are. Just start where you are. And so that can be with body weight moves, just like you said. Start there because if you're not doing anything right now, then doing something is going to make a big difference. So start with body weight. And then once you become familiar with just some of the body weight moves, like let's say squatting or let's say lunging, or push-ups. And push-ups can be wall push-ups or elevated push-ups, right? When you're first starting out. I don't know anyone, and I'm not saying it's possible, but I don't know anyone who has not worked out who can just get on the floor and do a regular full body push-up, right? So start with elevated or even wall push-ups. And that's what I try to tell the ladies that I work with. You're starting where you are, and the more you do, the stronger you're going to get. So I actually have an 8-week program called Strong Over 50 with Body Weight and Bands. And we start with body weight and bands. And bands are they can be tough and challenging because you can get a set of bands, and of course the thicker the band the more resistance, and so you can do all kind of exercises. You can do, I showed the ladies in the group how to do the chest press, banded chest press, right? Those bands are so tough. Overhead shoulder press with the bands. And the thing about the bands is people think they're not that challenging. But again, when you start where you are, you start from the beginning, you can start with bands and really see changes in your strength and see even changes in your body. Some of the ladies talked about how, wow, I look different than I did 8 weeks ago. That's because you're building muscle, right? Now, at some point, and you know this, you'll have to challenge yourself a bit more. And whatever that can be in the form of, you know, dumbbells or kettlebells or machines, whatever it is you want to do. But certainly start where you are. And then another reason, I'm going back to your first question, or the question right before this, Leo, is women also are sometimes afraid that they're going to hurt themselves. And I think that was in part of what you just said as well. So it's really about being safe. It's about listening to your body. It's about proper form, right? Whether you work with someone in person at a gym, whether you work with an online coach, is really about being safe and putting that as a primary goal. So I think that's another reason why people are hesitant, is they're not very sure of themselves, and they don't want to get hurt in the process. And who can blame them, right?
Yeah. And actually, on that note, yeah, there's obviously there's always a little bit of an injury risk when it comes to strength training, but you could even just like you could easily say there is even more of an injury risk if you don't strength train at all. And that's,
Agreed.
I think, something that a lot of people then a lot overlook, because there's always a slight risk when it comes to exercise, even not even necessarily just strength training, any sort of exercise. But again, if you never exercise, and then yeah, there's an even higher injury risk because of the factors we've mentioned.
No, you're right. That's a great message to emphasize. You
Yeah.
know, the like I said, the stronger you are, the more likely you are to recover a bit faster. But yeah, the more active you are, then it is possible. Injury is possible, but I think your body is able to recover a bit more.
Yeah.
And I know that to be true. It's so funny you mentioned that, because I actually had this conversation with one of my physicians. I did something to my shoulder and I was like, darn it, and he said, well, Traci, you're active. He said, the more active you are, it's possible for you to have, a couple of injuries, but you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. And so I think that's something to just keep in mind. But the injuries are a little different, right, Leo, in that, I'm not, again, walking down the street and maybe tripping over, a rock or a pebble or a stick or something, being able to catch myself, because I've been strength training and because I've been engaging in physical activity. I would prefer that than the opposite. So, anyway, yeah, I'm
Yeah,
just
well,
agreeing with what you said.
yeah, yeah, it's really interesting to hear everything you have to say as well. I so this is like kind of slightly going on to the next topic in a way. So there's obviously a lot of myths surrounding resistance training, and nowadays I feel like mm, yeah, I feel like nowadays it's starting to get maybe it's on like just more of an appreciation for what it can do in regard to everything we've mentioned with the balance, the health, injury prevention, etc. And why it's good to have, you don't necessarily have to look like a bodybuilder, but why it's good to have extra muscle and be stronger. And I feel like nowadays it's definitely growing in popularity. And this is just me asking out of curiosity, do you feel like before, like maybe do you feel like it's a trend you've seen over time? Because I'm only I'm 27, so obviously I haven't been around as long. But do you feel like maybe, let's say, when you were 27, was this something that was pushed as much, or what was pushed as much, if not that? And maybe there, because I can definitely see there used to be a lot more myths surrounding it. Maybe other myths have taken its place, but yeah, maybe do you think it just got its appreciation? Maybe I don't know, maybe
Yeah,
your generation.
yeah. That's a good question. And I wonder, I wonder about that. And here's what I mean. So you said you were 27.
Hmm.
When I was 27, I mean, right, I was still, I remember going to Gold's Gym. I had a membership at Gold's Gym. So I think even when I was younger, I worked out and, my husband and I went to Gold's Gym together and I did strength training there using, the machines. And I remember then in my life more using the machines than the dumbbells and the barbells at that time. So so I've always been active. I've had periods in my life where I've slowed down and didn't do as much, but now I'm much more consistent. But I wonder if we're seeing more people talk about strength training now just because we have social media and we have those outlets that allow us to really see what people are doing and really share the message. I could be wrong. I don't know, but I know that is one factor. I know, look at you and I, we're in different countries and we're talking to each other via Zoom and talking about fitness. So I'm just wondering if that's a factor playing into the strength training is that you can communicate more with more people at one time, and that could be it. So, or maybe not. I have
Mm.
no idea, but that's certainly something that I think about. You know, I have women in my group like from the UK and from Australia, and that's blowing my mind,
That's
right? That
awesome.
we can work out together and we're not even in the same state,
Mm.
let alone in the same gym, right? So um, that would be, my take on some of it. But it could be that we are becoming more keen to the need for strength training and physical activity.
Yeah, and the reason why that crossed my mind was just because, like many things, a lot of things go. I don't know if in and out of fashion is the right word, but like where I guess you could obviously when it comes to strength training, a lot of people do like to speak about nutrition as well, or when it comes to exercise and different dietary approaches tend to have maybe its period where it's a lot more popular. Like I know high fat used to get pushed quite a lot maybe in the 90s. I can't remember. I remember looking into it, and then it was like I mean, low fat got pushed a lot, and then low carb, and then
Right.
and then it's like, and then maybe like no meat, and like there's basically a phase for every maybe every few years. There's a phase where a certain dietary approach is more popular, and that's why I was just maybe wondering about maybe if it was the same with exercise, and um and maybe if that had anything to do with maybe a lot of people just not wanting to strength train just because they didn't grow up ever, maybe uh just have maybe seeing the research or having social media at their fingertips and
Yeah.
to see
Yeah,
it.
no, well, I mean, and that's a really good point. And I know that probably the generation before me, I'm sure that that had a lot to do with it. I mean, you didn't see like the generation before me, right? You didn't see a lot of women's strength training whatsoever. Cardio was the thing to do, right? And it was all about cardio. It was like, we we used to do aerobic classes, right? So much. And you come out of there like sweating after an hour. And so that was huge. And then, but well, again, I don't know if you well, yeah. Well, anyway, the point is, I don't know. But then cardio got like a bad reputation, right? It was like, oh, don't do cardio. But now we're realizing that no, really, you need a balance. You need to do strength training and you need to do cardio. They are both good for you. And your cardiovascular system and your muscular system and endurance, they're both needed. So
Mm.
um, hopefully we are learning what is best for our bodies. And moderation obviously is really important for everything.
Yeah, definitely. You want ideally want to. There's a middle ground to the both of them.
Yeah.
This is just me asking out of curiosity again because I remember I wouldn't work out in the gym, but I remember stepping into a gym. It was like in the 2000s, early 2000s. And I remember gyms back then. I didn't work out back then, but I just remember just being in there. And gyms back then used to have, I would say they were dominated with cardio equipment. And it would be mostly treadmills. There wouldn't be anywhere near as much resistance training machines. And I remember you could easily walk into a gym and just see, I would say the majority of the equipment was maybe treadmills again, maybe cross runners or stationary bikes. And nowadays I also feel like, and I guess this is just a bit of a random topic, but yeah, nowadays I feel like a lot of gyms are actually starting to cater more towards maybe strength training, because I feel like they're also noticing a lot of people are starting to prioritize that a lot more as well nowadays, which I think is really good to see as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And the great thing, most gyms also, because they're catering to strength training, you know how we talked about start where you are. They have a variety of options to use for strength training. Like our gym has the area where there are kettlebells, and then there are even the TRX systems. So there are a lot of those. And then they, just have a lot of different options around strength training so that, the lighter weight dumbbells compared to those heavier dumbbells. So wherever you are, wherever you start in your journey, nowadays many gyms are able to support the beginner as well as the advanced. And that's always nice to see.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely. So there's like a couple more questions that I actually have in my mind. So I was gonna say, so let's say, and I feel like this would be a really good one for you, is I was going to say over 50. I know, but you don't have to necessarily limit that, I guess, to on this limit the age on this specific question. You could just say maybe any age. Let's say maybe for many years now, you've been neglecting exercise. Maybe you haven't really looked after your health. Maybe, you've been looking after maybe your children. Maybe you've been working and just, everything's taken a backseat. Before you know it, you realize you're quite out of shape and you'd like to do something to change it. Where do you think, when it comes to training specifically, is perhaps a good place to start? And again, I know that's quite a broad question, but where does your mind go to?
No, I think that's a great question. Because you might have a lot of folks listening right now who want to like start. Where do I start? So my mind is going again in a couple of different directions. The first thing I would say is if someone is able to um, to get some in-person training or an online coach, I think that would be a great option because a person who knows what they're doing can start you off safely and on the right track, right? And that's what it's all about, being safe. So if that's an option for someone, then I would start there. The second option would be, or even if you start there, is if you haven't done anything and you've been sedentary. And by sedentary, I know that you're getting up, going to work every day and doing all of that, but sedentary in that when you're not working, right? When you're not taking care of kids, you're sitting and you're not physically active, then you can always start with walking, right? Walking is a great place to begin, especially if you're not doing anything. Walk for 10 minutes, 15, 20, 30. Work your way up and really get your endurance up. So start with walking. And then the third thing I would recommend is starting with what we talked about earlier, some body weight moves, just so that you can get your body used to using its own body weight as resistance. And so that could be with doing squats. And I will tell you, Leo, that because I coach online and many of my ladies come to me and they will say, whew, my knees hurt, you know that, Traci, and or they'll say, the right knee is not working like the left knee. We'll start with chair squats, right? I'll just say, okay, here's what I want you to do, and I'll demonstrate what chair squats look like. And I say you have to get in and up and down from chairs. You sit on the toilet, get up off the toilet. These are things that you need to be able to do. So we'll start with chair squats, and then from there, I'll move them to body squats, and then from there, we'll do some goblet squats. So I think what I would say is when you're starting with resistance training, start with an accessible level and then progress from there, whether again it's squats or whether it's push-ups like we talked about, starting with the wall push-ups, moving down the elevated, and then eventually working your way to the floor and doing standard full body push-ups. So start where you are and progress from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, you broke it down very well there. And there's so many things that I could specific points that I could go down, but one I will is I think because a lot of people sometimes might hear walking, like, I want to make results a lot like walking. What's that going to do? Like, I think a lot of people just don't give walking the appreciation. Like, walking can make a huge difference. Walking is a great form of exercise, and
Great.
and yeah, I think it gets overlooked a lot. And yeah, if you haven't been doing something for a long time, then I guarantee like starting with a 15-minute walk maybe every day is a great place to start. And maybe that's not sexy or marketable for a lot of
Right.
people, but it's the truth. And again, just going on a walk can definitely make a big positive difference when done consistently over the long term. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I agree. And I agree with you. People don't give walking the respect that it
Yeah.
deserves, right?
Yeah.
And then when you think of it also, again, whether they're 27 or 57, start with walking and just be patient because you're on this journey for a lifetime. Like there is no finite, I would say there is no finite destination. It's like a lifetime. So you've got your whole life to work out, to exercise. So start where you are, take your time so that you are able to be consistent and stay in it for the long run, right? A lot of people hop right to somebody else's, like start where you are. Nope, they want to start where somebody else is.
Hmm.
And then they end up getting injured, like we talked about before. So it's don't rush it. Just start for sure. Start, take your time, and do that gradual challenge as you move forward.
Yeah, there's no deadline. And I think a lot of the pressure that people put on themselves is usually more mental than anything. It's usually like they give themselves like I don't know, an 8-week deadline. Like there
Right.
doesn't, and more often than not, there is no need for that. And what ends up happening is they put a lot of arbitrary pressure on themselves. Maybe if by week 5 they haven't made as much progress as they think they should, they end up quitting. And yeah, it's like you said, this is just remember, we have to remember this is a journey for life. And I think and this is something I've already realized myself because when I was a teenager, in fact, I used to put so much pressure on myself. I used to train in a way that probably wasn't the best for my joints.
Mhm.
Because by my early 20s, I was already feeling like a lot of just my joints weren't feeling too good. And I was like, okay, I should not be feeling like that. So I completely changed up the way I started training, looked at it in a completely different way. And now I feel the best I've ever felt. Um, and it was
Good.
just and that came from just a place of putting a lot of pressure on myself because I wanted results ASAP.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there
Yeah.
was that. But the final question I actually had for you today was a bit more of a selfish one, but I do feel like a lot of the listener would definitely gain some value from it. So you mentioned that you were resistance training in your 20s, you were going to Gold's Gym. A question I really want to ask you is if you could go back and maybe give yourself, that younger version of yourself, one bit of advice when it comes to training, what would that bit of advice be?
Ooh, that's a good
I see a big
question.
smile.
Well, and that's a really great question. I think for me, oh, this is like, so this is my well, yeah, you said my 27. What would I
Yeah.
tell my 27? So I think I would tell myself to be more confident in who you are when you're at the gym and when you're participating in strength training and physical activity. Um, and that challenge. Yeah, I went to the gym and like I said, I did the machines and I could probably finish my workout in 20 minutes and be done, right? So like I would tell my younger self to um don't take like when you're going to the gym, don't take that opportunity for granted. Challenge yourself and have fun while you're doing it. Um, but don't just go through the motions. There are some days when you have to. I mean, you're tired, and I'm not saying it's an excuse or whatever, but life happens. Put it that way, life happens. But be consistent with working out, perhaps with a goal in mind, Leo, and that goal in mind would be to be the strongest, most fit person that you can be at this age so that you can continue to be fit and strong at a later age, right? Don't just go through the motions, but have some purpose behind it.
Mm. Yeah, I like that. And I think that's a great place to end it on, unless there was something you wanted to bring up or another,
No,
maybe
I
another
am.
question.
No, it's good. That was a great question, and
Yeah.
it made me reflect a lot. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, that was it was yeah, it was a great conversation overall. Yeah, so I guess where can people find you in case anyone wants to just follow or dive deeper into more of your work?
Yep. So I'm on Instagram, Fitness with Traci, and my website is fitnesswithtraci.com. So pretty easy to remember.
Yeah, I'll leave links for those in the show notes of this podcast episode so the listener can just check it out in there and have a link. But otherwise, Traci, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it so much. It was a really good conversation. I know we were meaning to have this call for a little while now, so I'm really happy that it finally got to happen. And otherwise, yeah, take care and I'll see you around.
I am too. I'm glad we were here. Thanks, Leo.